Hello everybody, I'm Ocean, and it's Sunday, the 18th of August. It'll probably be a different day when you actually watch this video because it's pretty late at night and I've just started and then I have to edit it and then, yeah. So a couple of weeks ago, I was reading a book which was a compilation of the poems of Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and I was reading it in college because I like reading and I tend to carry books with me everywhere, well, at least one book anyway. So I was reading this book and people reacted in different ways. So there was one guy who said, Coleridge, I love Coleridge, and the rest of the people were broadly divided into two categories. The first category would look at it and then they would nod or say something mildly approving, and the second category would look at it and then they would look at me and then they would say, poetry? Really? Why are you reading poetry? As someone who has grown up around books and with books, I find this opinion extremely strange. Is it wrong to read poetry? Does it make me somehow a lesser person? I don't get it. Now, I do understand where people could be coming from because poetry is very different from other forms of writing. Prose, essentially. Now, while reading prose, you don't have to think as much as you do while reading poetry. Now, of course, you don't have to think while reading poetry. You can just read the words, but that doesn't make it exciting. If you really want to enjoy it, you have to think. And maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe people don't want to think. Maybe that's why they think poetry is hard or difficult or something. But the truth is, even if you just skim through a poem, you do get a feel of it. You get what it's about, to some extent. You form your own opinions. You have ideas. Everybody has ideas. For instance, Jabberwocky. It's a completely nonsensical poem, and in fact, when Humpty Dumpty asks Alice what she thought of the poem, she doesn't really understand it, but she does form an impression. The first time I read Jabberwocky, I just had an impression of something, and I didn't really know what it was about. Of course, now I've broken it down, and in fact, I'd like to do a video on it someday, just, analyzing Jabberwocky for you, from me. My point is, you shouldn't condemn poetry, you shouldn't look down upon it because it's different from what you're used to. One incident that I remember very clearly took place in school when I was in the 12th grade. So one of our English assignments was to write a poem. Everybody said, a poem? I can't write a poem. There's no possible way I can write a poem. But everyone had to do it if they wanted those marks, and so they did. I was collecting them, and I read quite a few of them, and everyone's was good. Each and every person's. That's because everybody does have something that they want to say, and everybody is capable of putting that into a poetic form. You might think that it's easier to write a story than it is to write a poem, but it isn't. Because when you're writing a story, you have to follow rules. When you're writing a poem, you're free to do literally whatever it is you want to do. You can make the words rhyme, you can make the words not rhyme, you can use correct grammar, you can use incorrect grammar, you can put punctuations wherever the hell you want, you can play around with capital letters, you can play around with the way the poem is presented to you. In conclusion, poetry gives you far more freedom. If there's anything you want to say, try putting it into a poetic form. Trust me, it'll sound much better at the very least, because there's nothing more putting off than badly written prose. Now, I'm not saying that there cannot be bad poetry, though I'm yet to find an example of really bad poetry. I have never seen really bad poetry. Fortunately, I have never heard the Vogons. Poor Arthur Dent. Poor Ford Prefect. My favorite poet is Lewis Carroll, and my favorite poem is Jabberwocky, so I'm going to be linking you to it. I've just realized something very funny. You have to think more while reading poetry, but not while writing it. Now, one of the reasons to that could very possibly be that when you're reading a poem, you're trying to get into the head of the poet. But you're already in your own head, so you don't have to think as much when the words are just flowing out like a waterfall. If you want to read an essay that I've written on prose versus poetry, links in the description, along with the links to my Tumblr and my Twitter and my Facebook. I hope you have a great day, or night, or whatever, and have fun! Oh, and also like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to hear more random dialogues on random topics from me.